see you guys in the dark.
This happened on St. Patty's Day of 2008, about a month after I got my driver's license. My buddy Eric and I had nothing to do, so we decided to cruise around the Pike, which is a long stretch of highway surrounded by bars, strip clubs, restaurants, general scenery and stuff, and enjoy the fact that I could finally drive at night. Prior to driving down the Pike, we stopped at a convenience store to get some grub. As we were about to eat the food in my car, an older, very thin black woman approached my vehicle. Being an anxiety-stricken teenager with not-so-fast reflexes, I did nothing. She tapped on the window, which I rolled down just a crack. I noticed that she had a horrible lazy eye. I've got lazy eye too, but her one eye was just darting off in 100 different directions. It was dressed somewhat promiscuously. She was a twig, though, so even her tight fishnet stockings were loose on her bare bone legs. She looked at me with one normal eye and asked if I can give her a ride to the liquor store a couple miles down the Pike. I should make it clear that if this were to happen today, I wouldn't have made the mistake of letting her in my car. But I was a dumb kid, and so that's exactly what I did. Eric got out of the passenger side and sat behind it instead. He later explained that he did this so that if she tried anything funny, he could attack her from behind. And the woman got in and sat beside me. She kept thanking me, making an effort to constantly point out how sweet we were for doing this. As we drove down the Pike, she started asking us questions. It started off as small talk. Where you guys are from? How old are you? What are you guys driving around on St. Patty's Day for? And eventually she asked if we were looking to party. We assured her that we were not looking to party, and she smiled and said, "Oh, no. 2 good-looking boys like yourselves must be trying to party tonight." Still, I continued telling her that we were just trying to have a calm and normal night. Soon she mentioned that a friend of hers had just gotten off of work and asked if we like Hispanic women, which is a very what-the-fuck out-of-the-blue question. I told her I, didn't mind Hispanic women, I suppose, and she smiled. Good. She's looking to party tonight, too. I don't know why it took me that long to figure it out, but it was about that time that the unnerving thought popped into my head. Dude, I think that you just picked up a fucking hooker. If that was true, then I had already broken the law. So a bit of me went into panic mode as she proceeded to ask us more questions. She asked us if we drank, and immediately reminded me that I was taking her to a liquor store. Before long, we finally reached the liquor store, and as I pulled in, I noticed that the parking lot was completely empty, except for a pickup truck. A man was seated in the driver's seat of the truck, and upon seeing us, he turned his car on and drove around me, blocking the exit. My first thought was, oh God, it's a fucking ambush. The man stepped out of his vehicle and began yelling at me. I rolled down the window to hear what he was saying and heard, "She's bad news, man." Without any hesitation, I turned off the car, grabbed my keys, and leapt out of the car, not even shutting the door behind me. "What do you mean?" I asked him. "That woman in your car is a prostitute." Confirming my earlier suspicions of this. She walks around that Wawa back there and asks men to drive her to buy booze, and then to the motel about a mile down the road. She's bad news, man. Relieved that this man was evidently on my side, I let out a massive sigh of relief and begged him to help me. Again, I was a stupid teenager, and I had absolutely no idea what the hell to do. Back at the car, the lazy-eyed woman of the evening stuck her head out of the open door and asked if anything was wrong. The guy from the pickup angrily yelled, "Get out of that car, now!" She didn't listen. I could hear her muttering, "It's all right, they're cool. It's all cool." My savior in the pickup marched over to the car, swung open her door. He growled for her to get out once more, and didn't even wait for a response. He grabbed her and pulled her out, shoving her away. The entire time, she just kept mumbling, Nah, everything's all right. They said that they're cool with it," as my friend stepped out of the back seat and hopped into the front, slamming and locking the door behind him. The guy yelled at her once more, and she vanished behind the liquor store. I thanked him about a dozen times, and he warned me never to pick up strangers again. Just shortly before getting into his truck and driving off, I hopped back in the car and then sped away, nerves shot to oblivion. And today I refuse to go near that fucking Wawa, especially around March time. When I was 14, I was going through what my parents called teen angst. I would get aggressive over the smallest provocations. I got suspended from school for fighting. I started becoming mean and intolerable to be around. But I could be so nice and apologetic the next week or so, and the cycle would repeat itself. Hostility, mood swings, agitation, insomnia. Unbeknownst to me, or them, at the time I was suffering from bipolar disorder symptoms. Around my manic episodes, I would do really stupid things. I'd put myself into potentially fatal situations. Most of my friends stopped dealing with me, so I looked for new friends in the wrong places. I ended up coping with my episodes using illegal substances and alcohol. It was August, and school was starting back soon. I was having a really bad manic episode. I thought I was invincible, and everyone around me was jealous because they weren't having as much fun as me. I thought I was smarter than everybody. My parents took me to a psychiatrist, but I never spoke a word to her. I never even looked at her. I was in denial that something was very wrong with me. Around this time, my sense of danger and fear was very low. This particular manic episode was lengthy and lasted about 3 weeks. 1 week into the episode, I came up with the perfect idea that I should run away from home. I would survive by selling weed, and I would become the greatest cannabis salesman that lived. For those who aren't similar with the bipolar disorder, understand that while manic, sufferers can have delusional and grandiose ideas or thoughts. I packed up a few items, stole about $327 from my dad's wallet, copped a huge amount of weed, and went to a seedier part of town. I checked into a motel room. The woman never asked for identification, probably because I looked 18 or 19, and she just didn't give a fuck. I went 3 days on the run, and had only sold about 2 bags. I smoked until there was no more to sell. I had also spent a majority of my money on booze, and a new dress. I had to think of a way to make some more cash. I didn't want to go back home to my jealous family. I was coming back from a restaurant when a middle-aged dude in a blue car pulled beside the curb. He rolled down the window and offered me $100 to have sex with him. I agreed. Hold on, I wasn't actually going to prostitute myself. I thought I was so smart and conniving that he would just put the money in my hand and I would run off with it. So, we go to the motel not far from the one that I was hiding out at. I had it planned out perfectly. I would run out with the money in my hand. I believed that I was strong enough to fight a 5'11" man who had a lot of muscle. I believed that I wasn't in any danger. We go into the room, which smelled like feet, and I asked him for the money. The dude ignores me and started kissing me and trying to take my clothes off. Most sane females would have been frightened, but I wasn't exactly sane. So, I wasn't really worried about rape or injury. I forcefully pulled away from him, and he slapped the shit out of me. He slapped me so hard that I had a brief moment of clarity and ran to the bathroom and locked the door. I opened the window and just jumped out. My adrenaline and shock eventually wore off, and I actually laughed at the whole thing. Luckily, a police officer recognized me as a missing person and took me home to my parents before I could do anything else dangerously stupid. Thinking back on the situation, I don't find anything about my actions humorous. My stomach churns a little bit thinking about how he could have raped me, even murdered me. I'm now taking medication for my illness. My bedroom has floor-to-ceiling windows which face the backyard. I rarely feel the need to close the curtain because I don't want to shut out my great view. It makes my dogs and cats happy too. And the only way anyone would ever be able to see in is if they're just passing by. My yard is encircled by both a tall fence and a thicket of bushes, and trees on both sides of that fence, all on my property. A couple weeks ago, I pulled into my driveway and was greeted by a woman waiting for me. She claimed she was there out of concern for the neighborhood children. According to her, she and her kids had seen me through my window, dressed inappropriately, while they were hiking. I told her that wasn't possible, because the only way anyone could see into my windows would be through my own backyard, which is far from any hiking trail. She replied with a condescending, "Well, sweetie, I'm sorry, but I have proof." She pulled out her phone and showed me a picture taken of me in my underwear through my window. It was very blurry, but I knew that it was me, mostly based on the fact that my hot tub, pool, and garden were in the foreground of the picture. I pointed this out, and the fact that the only way those things could possibly be in picture was if it had been taken from inside my backyard. I asked her directly if she and her kids had jumped my fence. Instead of giving me a direct answer, she began lecturing me about how inconsiderate it was to be an exhibitionist around children. I explained that I would never exhibit myself in a situation where I thought young children could see me, but I wasn't expecting anyone to trespass in my yard. She ignored the mention of trespassing and launched into a tirade about how she's sure I must be very proud of my body since I've clearly paid enough for it. I've had my breast implants and some skin removal due to weight loss, and a few tattoos to cover up some scars. But that's no excuse to expose myself to children. She ended her smug little charade about saying, "So honey, you'll be closing your blinds from now on, right?" I told her that no, I absolutely won't be, because only people on my property could see in the windows, and that she and her children were not allowed on my property. She dropped the sweetness and started bitching that the previous owner of my home had been family friends and hadn't locked their gates, and why even have a butterfly garden if kids can't visit, and that it takes them half an hour to walk to the park unless they go through my yard, and that she'd seen kids at my place before, and why were only she and her children being excluded. At this point, I was pissed, so I told her that I lock my gates to keep assholes like her out. She kept harping on the fact that she'd seen other kids at my place, so I told her that those are my nephews, who I love, whereas I don't actually give a single fuck whether you and your kids live or die. She started screaming and crying at me like she was possessed. I don't know if you guys remember that insane God warrior lady from Trading Spouses, but that is the caliber of yelling that this woman in my driveway was doing. I went inside, but she stayed there for a few minutes, going on and on about being disrespected and how she was going to call the cops because I was a pedophile whore making death threats towards her children. A few days afterwards, the psycho returned along with a police officer. She had reported that I was exposing myself to her kids and making threats on her life. I told the officer my side of the story and showed him my backyard so that he could see that the crazy lady's photo evidence could have only been taken while trespassing on my property. He had printouts of her evidence, and I'm showing him on the pictures that they had to be taken inside my fence, when I realized the pictures are actually from several different occasions. I'm wearing different garments in some of them. They were taken on several occasions. I pointed this out, and I point out again that all of them had to be taken while trespassing. At this point, it seemed to click for the officer that the lady was batshit, though perhaps he already had an inkling, and he began questioning her about trespassing and taking pictures of me without my consent. He told us both that actually I could pursue charges if I wanted. At this point, she dialed the crazy up, started babbling an insane stream of consciousness that went something like, well, she actually, another thing, I didn't say earlier, but I think she's a prostitute. She's got men over all the time. I saw her. She was in the yard. She was with two men, but not the man who lives there with her. You know, are they, is there any of that? Who needs to be in that big house without no children? And I mean, she has the big fake breasts, stripper breasts. She's a bimbo, prostitute breasts. How is she affording them? What I'm saying is something illegal. Well, it must be illegal. It's going on in there. Are we taking any of that into account? This has probably caused the breasts. It's probably because of it. That's probably because. I'm not doing it justice, but it went on for at least a full 30 seconds of insane babbling and ranting, while me and the cop just stared at her. When she stopped, the cop essentially said, "Well, okay, I'll look into that, but right now, we're discussing the issue of trespassing, ma'am," and photographing her without her consent. She ignored that and blurted out, "She said she didn't care if my children died." The officer looked at me with a raised eyebrow, but told her that that's not a crime, and attempting again to redirect it to the issue of trespassing and photography. Once again, she ignored that, and then asked the officer if he had any kids. He told her that he didn't, and she kind of threw her hands up like, "Oh, well, that's the problem here." The officer assured her that the law does not change based on whether the responding officer has kids or not. The cop then asked me what I wanted to do. I said that I wanted to drop the whole thing on the condition that she deletes the pictures of me in her phone and never set foot on my property ever again, She didn't want to agree to either condition, but ultimately the officer persuaded her to hand her phone over, and he went through her pictures, deleted them himself from all the folders. His words. Did she have them saved in multiple folders? All the while, this bitch acts like she's being violated. My second condition was more of a sticking point. This woman did not want to agree to never set foot on my property. She kept diverting the discussion by saying shit like, she has other kids over here all the time, so I don't see an issue with why I can't be on here. Well, what if my husband is with the kids? How is he supposed to know? Or if they're with a babysitter? And tearfully, over and over again. I just don't understand what the problem is. Eventually, officer gave up and just told her that she'd officially been warned whether she wanted to accept that or not. She started weeping as if someone had slapped her and had to be escorted off my yard. I thought that would be the end of it, but it's come to my attention that she's going around door to door in the neighborhood, claiming that I'm a pedophilic prostitute, and asking people to sign a petition to get me to move. Absolute insanity. So, now I'm going to have to figure out how to issue a cease and desist to this bitch, I guess. What a fucking headache this woman's becoming. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.